Every day. My name's Karen Klingenberger. I'm a master gardener with Cornell Cooperative Extension. I actually worked at Cooperative Extension for 20 years before I retired. Then I took a year off, and then I started working for the Monroe County Parks Department, where I got to drive around Highland Park in a gator all day, which was the best job ever. Didn't pay much, but it was fun. So I've been growing tomatoes since my apartment, our first apartment. I had tomatoes in a pot on the windowsill. When you have tomatoes indoors, you have to be the bee. You have to take a paintbrush and you have to paint the flowers and spread the pollen around. Otherwise, you're not going to get any fruit. So that was the first thing I learned I did wrong with tomatoes. I didn't know that. So why am I not getting tomatoes? But we're not here to talk about indoor tomatoes unless you want to. I've got a list of things I want to touch on, but if something's burning, anything I say that gives you a burning question, please do jump in, all right? Are you going to monitor our friends from Zoom? Do we have some friends on Zoom? Yeah. Hey, okay. Holy smokes, well, okay, got to be serious then. The description of what I was going to talk about are the different sizes of tomatoes. So let's begin with that. The beefsteak style, which is usually your big boys. Some heirloom tomatoes are big like that. What do we normally use those for? Pretty much slicing in salads, on sandwiches. Those are for eating, of course. They're all for eating. And then we have the plum type, which are more for making sauce or drying. If any of you know about how to dehydrate tomatoes, they come out beautifully dehydrated. And then you also have the cherry or the grape size, which are basically for tossing into salads and for eating fresh. I started with those when my kids were little because they would eat them right off the vine. And they ate them, so that's why I grew them. And at this point, with my husband and I alone, I'm back to growing just cherry tomatoes because I don't need all the big ones. And the farm market, I live near the mall, farm market's there. And you can get tomatoes pretty cheap. So I leave the growing of the big ones to the professionals. But you can do that too. I used to do it. You can do it too. There are a couple of terms that you may or may not have heard. Do we have experienced tomato growers in the group? Beginners? Okay. There are two words, long words, determinant and indeterminate. And they will say that on the tag. I don't have a tag to show you. A determinate tomato is one that will produce a lot of tomatoes over a short period of time. And that will usually be your beefsteaks, things like that. So if you're into sauce making, and the plum types are also determinate, if you want a lot of tomatoes that wants to do something with, make sauce or things like that, or chili sauce, oh, that's the best. Then you're going to want to type that kind of a tomato, determinate. Indeterminate is a plant that will continue flowering and producing fruit right up until frost. The determinate ones stop producing after they've done their first flush, but the indeterminate just keep on going. So they're quite a bargain. So that's what those words mean on those labels. In Monroe County, we have a bedrock of limestone. So our pH is generally pretty high. And I'll say generally because there are pockets of acidic soil. If you live north of 104, you might have sandier soil than those of us who live on the south side of 104, just because this was where originally the lake came all the way up to Ridge Road. So that might change your pH somehow. It certainly changes your texture. I grow my tomatoes in soil that's been tested at 7.8, which is very alkaline. And it's a very clay soil, but I do well. I also make raised beds where I will add compost. Adding compost to any kind of soil makes it better. So think about that. So pH, tomatoes normally want a pH between 6 and 6.5, but as I said, mine do very well at 7.8, and I don't put any acid fertilizer on them. So I think they're pretty forgiving in terms of pH and even texture. The texture of the soil, if you've got sandy soil, you're going to want to be cognizant of the fact that these babies are tropical plants. And not only do they want heat, they want a lot of water. So if you've got sandy soil, you might have to water more often than people with clay soil do. So keep that in mind. And again, any questions, jump in, please. So if you've got a problem, am I coming out through on this? I just unzipped this. Okay, hello people. If you've got a problem with your soil and you want to build raised beds, there's been a lot of discussion about soil in the city, especially next to houses that might have had lead paint, that might have chipped off and fallen into the soil. In general, a plant will absorb lead in its leaves, but not in the fruit. So it's not as big a problem. But if you're uncomfortable with that, especially, I wouldn't grow lettuce where there's lead because that's all leaves. But if you're concerned about that, you can build a raised bed and bring in soil. Doesn't have to be expensive soil. Unfortunately, when you order topsoil from these guys who bring it in their trucks and dump it on your driveway, I hope none of you are on looking on us now. Sometimes that's not the best quality soil. So your best chance to improve that is organic material. Anybody see the thing in the paper this morning about mulch? It was in the real estate section. And they talked about calling tree guys, if you want a load of free mulch, they'll bring you free mulch, which is wonderful, but they forgot to tell you that this is fresh wood. It hasn't decayed yet. It hasn't become mulch. So the danger there is, as it decays, it takes nitrogen from the soil. And you don't want that happening in your vegetable garden because you'll be starving your plants. You'll have to use some more fertilizer. And unless you've got soil test kits, that's hard to determine what you've got in there. Because they're tropical, they don't like cold. It's a little too late to start them from seed. I started these from seed probably a month ago. So it's not impossible, but if you want to start them from seed, get going today. And they want warmth. They germinate in 65 to 70 degrees. So I have mine on top of a grow light. So there's heat coming up underneath them. And they do beautifully in my basement under lights. I have the pleasure and honor of having a greenhouse. So these guys have been growing in my greenhouse for a couple of weeks. But my challenge there is it's been getting so darn cold at night. I have an electric heater. I can't wait to see my RG&E bill. But it's worth it to keep these babies going. But because they want tropical temperatures, we don't want to put them in the ground that's too cold. They won't die, but they won't grow really. And this is typical of tomatoes, which is a member of the nightshade family, if you didn't know that. Also members of the nightshade family are eggplant and peppers. They also will not grow quickly if the ground is too cold. So 50 minimum, 60 is better. How do you tell the temperature of the ground? If you're really serious, you might want to get yourself a soil thermometer. This, I looked around here and I didn't see any here. So I'm gonna talk about where you can get them, okay? I got mine from Lee Valley Tools, which is a company out of Canada. And Gardener Supply Catalog also has them. I'm really not sure if anyone carries it locally, but you stick it in the ground and it tells you when you have reached 60 degrees, then you're safe. Before we had people who wanted to take the temperature of our soil, the rule of thumb around here was Memorial Day. And that's still, you're safe if you wait till Memorial Day. I like to push it a little bit and get my things in a little earlier than that, but I keep my eye on the weather report and make sure that I'm not doing it really too soon. And lately it's been hard to know. It's really crazy weather, but these guys, the earliest I'll put them in is the middle of May. So right now I'm keeping them going in my greenhouse. And they're not really happy about that. So let's talk about planting. I'm talking so much and fast that I'm getting all overheated. A tomato, this one fresh out of my greenhouse, these lower leaves are turning yellow. That's fine. These are the cotyledons, the seed leaves. We don't need those. They turn yellow and they fall off, and that's not a problem. So the tomato has a fuzzy stem. When we plant plants in general, we make sure we plant them at the same level that the soil is, because we don't want to starve the roots of oxygen. Roots need oxygen as much as they need water. So, but tomatoes are the exception. And in order to make a really healthy plant, I'm going to use the other one. give it the best chance possible. I'm going to take off a couple of lower leaves. Just pinch them right off. Come on, baby, what do you look like? There we go, nice roots. You can actually make a trench. I don't know if people there, but if any of you want to come up and see what I'm doing, you can actually make a trench in the soil, put the tomato down at one end of the trench and tip it slightly. You're going to actually bury a bit of that stem because the fuzz on this, those are all potential roots. So you're going to build a bigger, healthier root system by giving it a little more stem under the soil. And usually they have to be propped up a little bit. They don't really care to be laying down like that. But just bury deeper straight down or not? No, because it wouldn't get the oxygen. It would be, that's a good question. That really does need the oxygen. Now, in a pot, I brought 3 to show you, but in a pot this size, I would only use 1. And actually the pots I would prefer to use when I put them in pots is the big, deep plastic ones. And they've got them for sale here. Plastic because it's so heavy. Terracotta is nice, but you can't move it once you've planted it. So the big plastic ones are really very nice for this. And the tomato itself will really make quite a large root system. So that's why you need a big pot for it. And you're going to want to use a pot if you don't have a lot of garden space that you want to commit to the vegetable garden. You can have these pots right on your patio or your deck or anything like that. If you've got, I have large grand dogs that like to rip right through my raised beds, bless them. So that's the reason I would put mine in pots and away from the dogs. And also, if you have, or if your neighbors have black walnut trees, have you heard that black walnuts roots emit a toxin to other trees and plants? Not all others, but tomatoes are dead within 50 feet of a black walnut tree. I mean, you might not know what's wrong with my tomatoes. They just suddenly grow, and then they say, nope, I'm done. And you got to look around. Within 50 feet, if your neighbors have a black walnut tree, that could be the problem. So what do you do in a case like that? Then you'd have to build raised beds and put fresh soil in. I had a master gardener friend who had neighbors with black walnut trees. He actually changed the soil in his beds every 2 years because unfortunately those trees will find, the roots will find that lovely raised bed soil and grow right up into it. So he actually changed the soil. Now that is a lot more than I would do. Luckily my neighbors don't have black walnuts. Black walnuts are lovely to have. You can't grow lilacs under them. You can grow raspberries, but there's a very limited number of things you can actually grow under those. So have I confused you with that? I hope not. I hope not. No questions, huh? All right, watering. We talked about that. They really do like water, but it's delicate balance. How much water, how little water? You've really got to keep your eye on the skies and decide if you're having a drought, get yourself in raised beds. This works very well. And I don't know if you have them, soaker hose. You can lay the soaker hose right in your bed around your plants, cover them with a little bit of dirt even, and just leave the nozzle at the end so you can hook up your hose. And that does a beautiful job, beautiful job. And watering from underneath is really a good idea. I mean, you can water with a watering can on top and it gets the leaves wet. It's just basically washing the leaves off. You really want to get that soil saturated. However, and this is something else to throw at you, there is a condition called cat facing, where especially the large tomatoes on the blossom end, not the stem end, here's my tomato, but the blossom end will develop black cracks, and it's called cat facing. And that is actually a calcium deficiency brought on by inconsistent watering. Is that crazy? So if you water too much and then not at all, that would be inconsistent watering, and that's when you might see this condition. It's not brought on by a disease. It's calcium deficiency. The tomatoes are still edible, but they don't look very good. So fertilizer. Well, no. Once you've got them in the ground, I want to talk about fencing. They sell tomato cages here. This is one option. After you put it in the ground, you put the tomato cage on it right away so that you aren't trying to get a great big plant to grow in there afterwards. But I find that these tend to fall. So if you want to use these, I would definitely recommend putting stakes in too so that they don't fall. Because once the plant gets big and heavy, you know, it's going to lean to one side or the other. I don't use these. I use, I have rabbit fencing, and I drive stakes in the ground when the plant is small, and wrap it with rabbit fencing with big enough squares that I can reach in and harvest the tomatoes, because that wouldn't make much sense to wrap them up and not be able to reach them. Chipmunks are very good at reaching them. Chipmunks love cherry tomatoes. I will find skins where they have peeled them on a log or something. It's like they've had a little tomato party in the night, darn them. But I grow enough cherry tomatoes that I can share. But the rabbit fencing works really well for me, and I can really drive the stakes hard into the ground, and that works. You can let tomatoes sprawl. They are a vine, and you can let them sprawl naturally. If you've got a big area, that's fine. But it makes it hard to harvest them without stepping on some, and dirt splashes up on them and things like that. So I think that's basically the reason that we always recommend putting your tomatoes in cages or staking them somehow. Anybody have any experience with those things? None of you want to?
Since you were talking about things eating, at my house, I grew tomatoes last year. This is actually the second year, and I have a big bowl problem, and I've tried like so many things. I've got fencing, small fencing, dug it down. So basically it's a sharing thing. I had to,
well, unfortunately, the voles will eat the stem, and then you're done. So that's hard. You've really got to protect this. Also, there are things called cutworms. When you put a small plant in the ground, will crawl along the surface, and they just eat whatever they come across. They will also take care of your tomatoes if they're small enough. You can put a collar of cardboard around it to keep the cutworms out. But to keep the voles out, I would use, when the plant is small, especially, a product called hardware cloth. It's only 1/4 inch or half inch, I think. It looks like a screen with great big holes in it. Cut that and circle that around it. And voles probably won't get into that, but sink it in the ground a few inches. But again, you've got to do it when the plant is small before it starts sending out roots, because you don't want to hurt those roots. Yeah, voles are a real problem. They're a real problem for fruit orchards and all sorts of things. It's not a mole, it's a vole. Field mouse is another name for what it is. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, watering. Let's talk about fertilizing now. If I was growing only tomatoes, I would look at a product like this, Tomato Tone. I'm looking at CountryMax carries a lot of the organic companies. As Poma does not pay me, but I do like their products. And this has got a NPK, pardon me, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium of 346. So it's not very beefy, 346. It's not very high. But because I grow more than tomatoes, I go for garden food. Is this also organic? It doesn't say so, so I would think no. If organic is important to you, then they do make a Plantone, I believe, is their product that is organic. But for example, if I was to use this is 5-10-5, which is still a nice balance. In first number 5 nitrogen, that supports the green, the leaves. Nitrogen is what you put on your lawn, keep it green. The 10 is phosphorus. Phosphorus benefits the roots and the fruits. So if you're growing a fruiting plant, that's definitely something you'd want. And the K, the potassium 5, that is just for general overall health of the plant. I've got this right now. This is just potting soil that I have. I get a bale of potting soil every year to do my seeding in. This generally has absolutely no nutritive value. So you've got to fertilize. If you're putting it in a pot and you're using this kind of material, If you put it in a pot and you use your own native garden soil, that will have some nutrients in it, but you're still going to want to think about fertilizing and just follow the directions on the bag. It's really not that hard. You can either scatter shot the fertilizer, it's granular fertilizer, a couple of days before you put your plants in the ground. I'm not that smart to think about that ahead of time. So another thing you can do is side dress. And side dressing is taking about a teaspoon and just putting it next to it and working it into the soil next to it. And that works too. And you can do that every couple of weeks, side dress with a teaspoon of fertilizer. So that's not too bad, unless you've got a whole lot of them, in which case I would suggest doing the broadcasting first. Other problems that we have with tomatoes, you might notice if you grow cherry tomatoes and you don't harvest them quickly, they will split on one end. And that's just a matter of them growing so fast and so vigorous that they are more than mature and they're bursting their skins. So that's also not a disease. It's just a thing that they do. So I try to avoid that by going out and picking often and making sure I pick them maybe even a little greener than I like. They will ripen in the house. Well, that's just a minor problem. What are the problems that I talk about? Diseases, also on the tags or on a seed packet, there's a V or an F, and that will mean that they are not resistant. Yeah, resistant, not proof. Nothing can be absolutely 100% disease proof, but they're disease resistant to verticillium and fusarium wilt, and these will be on the labels. And these are problems that we have. You know, if you have verticillium wilt, it's a problem that's in the soil. And if you've heard of the method of rotating crops, this is why we rotate the crops. We try to put the tomatoes in different places and not put them back in the same place for 3 years. So I've actually got a chart in my house so that I know which bed had the tomatoes last. And that's also for the other nightshades, for peppers and for eggplants. Verticillium wilt will remain in the soil for like 3 years. So that's the reason that we move the plants around. So you want to find plants that say that they are resistant to that anyway, even if you're not using the same soil over and over again. So, and there are many. There are more of those coming along every day. They're bred for that. Pests, we talked about voles and cutworms. There is a pest I've seen once. It would knock your socks off. It's called a tomato hornworm. They grow that long and they're as big around as your thumb or more. I see nodding. They will strip your plant of leaves. I had one woman who was so upset by these. She put them in her driveway and drove over them. I don't think you need to do that. But, you know, get them off your plant because they will eat the leaves. If they're on your plant and you can stand it, if they have little white spines coming out of them, that is a parasite wasp case, and those will hatch and eat it and then create more of themselves to eat more of them. So if you can stand to leave it there, I would leave one if I saw those little white spines. But it's a bit morbid, but why not? Why not? There's information for you to use. Cornell has a pesticide guidelines for managing pests around the home. Got a whole page on what can go wrong with your tomatoes, which is kind of depressing. I don't mean to be here to tell you that you're going to fail, because I really have very few problems with my tomatoes. And Lee Beetle's hornworm. Yeah, they even got a picture of that hornworm if you want to see that. He's a beauty. He's a beauty. Also on the Cooperative Extension's website, there are many fact sheets available to you. I'm getting the website now. Here we go. It's, if you just put in counties, CCE, Cornell, EDU, Monroe. Okay, that's a lot of words. CCE Monroe really should take you to their website. And here's everything I've just said and more, growing tomatoes. There's a whole list of fact sheets on the menu on the left side of the screen. It says horticulture fact sheets and lots of different topics. There's some on the cat facing alone. There's one. So I just brought one example to show you. There's also live people there Monday through Friday from 9 to 12 on the gardening helpline. And that phone number, if you want to write that down, is 753-2555, where Master Gardener will answer your questions. Also, there's a form on the website where you can submit your question through email and even send a picture. And they have a diagnostic lab there where they can test your soil for pH and texture. And if you've got a disease problem that nobody can figure out, they'll also analyze that for you. The charge, I think, for both of those is $20. Kelly. Oh, okay. The Espoma, I think it's called Plantone. That's the organic variety. And if that's something you want to stick with, and I mean, why not? Why not? If you can get an organic product, let's go with that. I'm not strictly organic. I have used Roundup on occasion. It has its place, but when I'm growing vegetables, I want to stick with organic. Good question. Okay, 753-2555. And this time of year, they're there Monday through Friday. They go to 3 days a week in the wintertime. And they love talk about plants. Love, love, love. So that's all the highlights I have here. I'd open up to questions, but I'm afraid you guys don't have any questions. Oh, good. Good. It's pay attention to how you've been watering and make sure you're consistent with the watering. That's all it is.
Do you think well water has anything to do with the calcium in the well water? That's what we use for our garden, and last year we had that problem. Many of the bigger tomatoes got the black. And we never watered from the top. It was always underneath and always in the evening time, not during the day where the sun will kind of like scald the minerals into the fruit.
I have.
So I'm wondering if the calcium in the well water has anything to do.
I have not heard that. I wouldn't think so. It's the, you know, the plant takes up the calcium with the water. So I don't know. Do you know that there's a lot of calcium in the well water?
I know.
Yeah.
So you said it was calcium deficiency?
Yep. But that doesn't mean add calcium to the soil. It just means pay attention to how you're watering, and it should resolve. Well, I hope you have better luck this year. Yeah, and you can still use the top half of the tomato. Yeah. It's still edible, all right? Well, that's good. I like experimenting. That's good. All right. Any other questions, folks? I went through that fast. Come on up and have a look, and have a look at this fact sheet if you like. Yes.
As they grow pruning.
Also good question. Especially with the cherry types, these aren't old enough to show you. They will get a little secondary leaf there, and you pinch those off right up until the plant starts flowering, because they will grow into a pseudo branch and sap energy from the plant. So pinching those little sprouts is a very good idea. But in terms of pruning the plant itself, usually not necessary unless it's smacking you when you walk by. Then I would take that branch off. But no, they usually just leave them alone. They're very self-sufficient. And when at the end of the year, when it's time to take everybody out, frost has come, they're dead, I would, because of this ability of them to pass the wilts, Fusilium wilts, there's also late blight, early blight, I would bag them and throw them in the trash. I would not put them in my compost, and I'd compost everything else, everything but the tomato plants. Okay.
So I have a small area where I do tomatoes. So I planted them quite in the same. What can I do to the soil?
You have no other option?
So
Putting them
basically
somewhere
just
else?
Set
Set up
up
another area.
It's in that place, so it takes a while to amend it and everything.
Yeah.
So I just have to start over somewhere else. And then
That would be best. That would be best. I mean, you can roll the dice and try it again and again. Yeah, and you just never know. You just never know.
But there's nothing actually I can.
No, nothing you can, other than digging out and putting new soil in there, and that's ridiculous. I wouldn't do that. Anyone else?
You can grow peppers one year and tomatoes the next year in the same spot.
Technically not a good idea because they're the same family and are affected by the same diseases. So when I have my garden beds, and I have 8 by 4 foot garden beds, I will put my tomatoes and peppers and eggplants all in the same bed as a family and move them together to the next bed. And that way I try to control any problems that I might have. All right, so I hope I haven't discouraged you, because unfortunately, after I heard talks like this, I think, how does anything ever grow? But it does, it does. We just try to give you a little heads up on some of the problems you might have. So please come on up and have a look at this stuff and have a look at my fact sheet. And go. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
We learned that you plant garlic. When you rotate your plants and you plant garlic in a certain bed, and then garlic in a different bed, and just up there, it will kill off all those diseases. So
garlic will. I had not heard that. Okay. Yeah, there is a great book called Companion Planting, which talks about you can grow what you can grow with tomatoes and what you should not grow with tomatoes, because there are some things that they will fight with. But that's good to know. I'm going to home and look at that. Look that up. And speaking of looking at things up, where is it? This, you know, when I was gardening, we didn't have this. This, oh my gosh, you can find anything. But let me caution you that if you're looking for help, gardening help, please, please, please go to a site that ends with .edu, because there's a lot of quacks out there that are going to tell, okay, I hope nobody loves Jerry Baker, but I'm not putting baby shampoo and beer on my lawn. I'm going to go to the universities that have actually done research and know what products will and will not harm my soil, because I don't know what beer and baby shampoo is doing to the worms. I don't. So that's just a cautionary tale there. .edu, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers, Cornell, they've all done the research, then you can trust them.
I was told that for the black Gardener tomatoes, it's helpful to add lime to the soil. Have you heard?
No, I would not. I would not, because lime will raise your pH. And they're already wanting 6.5 or 6. So that will raise the pH. Now, lime used to be the things our fathers put on everything. And this was, you know, it was a countrywide thing. Put lime on your lawn. And then we found out we have limestone underneath our lawns. We don't need to do that. So save your money. Anything else?
I started my season about 5 weeks old, 4 or 5 weeks old.
Yep.
You're about 8 high.
Good.
When should I start harvesting? How long?
That's the darn weather. The darn weather is the problem. Harden them off, maybe, you know, depending on what our low temperatures are. The temperatures are, if our lows are consistently in the 50s, yeah, I think that's safe.
Because I got a greenhouse.
Oh, good, good. I've already got mine in the greenhouse, but I also heat it at night when it gets down to 30s. Yeah. Yeah, but 50s at night I feel comfortable with starting hardening them off. And hardening them off, are the rest of you familiar with that term? You don't just take it out of your basement and put it right in the ground, because the sun will fry it or the cold will kill it. So you've got to, you know, slowly get them used to the idea. Put them next to an east side foundation, maybe someplace where it's warm. Take them into the garage at night, so if it's going to get cold. And after several days of that, you can feel comfortable putting them in the ground. Good. Mm-hmm.
I said that all you need for a good companion.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally had found some transplant.
Oh, good.
You know, took a while finding. Okay. Now, they came the other day, I was out on it. I became in a bed I put a little dirt or something there, so I get ready to put them out into the yard.
Is there any green on them right now? Is there green on them now, or are they just the little onions?
So they're about the same long. Right now, little tiny bulbs.
Are they in
Well,
pot? Are they in pot? They're loose and they've already got green on them?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd put them in a pot with some soil. Yeah.
I put the pine so I get ready.
Yeah, I would. That's great. Good.
Because I had problems last year. So you with vine board with my.
With your squash?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, squash vine borers.
Yeah.
They'll kill your plant in one night.
Fluorescent green. That ain't good.
No, that's not good. That's not good. So you planted onions and that seemed to have solved the problem?
That's last year. Didn't do any good. So I looked at this home gardening thing from California. And he said that the onions were a good companion plant for tomatoes.
Yeah. I put tomatoes, especially if you're low on space, I put onion sets. Sets work for me between my tomato plants because they don't take too much room. And what are you going to do with that soil between your plants anyway? So that's a good way to maximize your soil. That's good.
And by onion sets, you mean like planting like 3 together?
The onion sets are what you call the little individual bulbs you get in a bag. They're really onions. They really are little tiny onions. And shallots can be done that way. Shallots are a nice thing to grow because they're pretty expensive in the basil. Yeah, there's a lot of, so check companion planting when you're doing that and see what the options are. That's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, if you plant just one crop and nothing else, that's what we call a monoculture. And if a disease comes through or an insect comes through, you're going to wipe it out. So interplant with different species, biodiversity. That helps a lot. It brings the beneficials in and they take care of your problems, your problem insects, hopefully.
Slugs don't usually eat.
Slugs? I haven't found that, no. They're more interested in snails and slugs. You know about giving them a beer party?
No.
You sink a saucer full of beer in the ground at night and they will enjoy themselves until they drown. And then you got to deal with that, unfortunately, because it's not very pretty. But that works. Then it's not like spreading. There's something called escargot. I can't believe they call it that for snails and slugs. Escar-GO. And that's a chemical. I mean, it works, but it's a chemical. So if you've got dogs especially, I wouldn't put anything like that around on your soil because bless them, they'll eat anything, our dogs. But yeah, I wouldn't put the beer out there when the dogs are out there either. They would drink that, wouldn't they? They would drink that. You can put that.
So for snails, my aunt, the hard-boiled eggs, she saves the eggshell, crumbles it up, sprinkles it.
Yes.
And they can't crawl through that.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's true.
The eggshells feel.
Yep.
Won't go over the
eggshell. That's very true. That really does work. That's a real good point. There's also a product called diatomaceous earth, which is ground up seashells, which you can also sprinkle around each plant. That might be a way to, it's not going to help your voles, unfortunately. They'll just step right over it. But it does keep the slugs and the snails from going after your plants. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I think also just the calcium.
I would think the eggshells would, yeah, definitely.
And nitrogen, if you use after hard-boiled eggs, save that water, let it cool, seal your eggs, and then use that in your plants. Really helps.
I did not know that. See, I always learn things when I do these. That's wonderful. Check that out. Good. Anybody else got anything I can learn? Appreciated. Let's see, Jesse, you have your hand up? No? Okay. Well, please come up and have a look at these and my fact sheets. Nobody wants to be on camera. These are super sweet 100s. This is what I'm growing this year. All of them. And
I add to that, those 2,200 last year, I planted those in the first year. I loved them. They don't crack. Like
they're not as apt to, yeah.
Yes, and they were wonderful.
Yeah.
Lasted through everything.
There's another product called Sun Gold, which are orange tomatoes. And they are so sweet. No, they're actually the same size and shape as the super sweet 100s. I gave one to my son in a plant, in a pot, I mean, and he finally said, Mom, don't these tomatoes ever turn red? I said, no, they don't. Gold, Sun Gold, that's why they're called that. Yeah.
I put one plant up on a fork, so she would go pick them up.
Yeah.
And then the rest were in the garden, you know.
Good.
Those are real sweet.
Very sweet, very sweet. But the plum ones you mentioned, they're a lot of fun too. I had golden pear one year. They're yellow and they look like little pears, and they're also very good for just eating right out of the garden. Well, thanks, folks. I hope it's not pouring rain at this point.